First off, I would like to give a big thank you to Euco for sending out this F22 Pro demo unit to New York City. This is the same demo unit that was in Ronin's video, and he passed it on to me for further testing. I don't have any referral link. I didn't ask for ones because I would like to, be as neutral and unbiased as possible for this review. All right, so I've had this wheel for 2 weeks now. I have ridden it quite a bit. And honestly, guys, the impressions is not good. And I'm going to explain to you guys why I don't really feeling positive about this wheel. So the first thing I'd like to point out, guys, is that the F22 Pro is actually the widest EUC ever made. And what I mean by this is in terms of like end to end width, this wheel is about 9.2 inches wide, which is, about 0.25 inches wider than the Extreme Bull GT Pro Plus, which is about like 8.9 something. So, this is actually the widest EUC ever made. And so because of this, the F22 Pro supports up to 90/90 street tire size. This is actually aftermarket tire. The F22 Pros come with a CST 186 knobby tire, which I don't think is like terrible on this wheel because the rim is wider, but the compound of the knobby is a little softer. So, which is why we decided to switch to a Michelin Pilot Street 2 instead, which I think improves the ride quite a bit more. Now, the second special thing about the F22 Pro is that unlike typical EUC that sports 1 or 2 shock for their suspensions, the F22 Pro sports 4 individual shocks for their suspension systems, and each shock is mounted on the corners of the wheel. So you have 1, 2, 3, 4. 2 of them are hydraulics and 2 of them are air shocks, and they are mounted diagonally to each other. So on the left front and rear right, you have the hydraulic shocks. On the front right and rear left, you have the air shock. And let me try to explain to you guys the reasoning behind the systems. You see, the air shocks allow the suspensions to compress a little bit more while being relatively lightweight. So it is, saving a few pounds from the weight of the wheel. On the other hand, the hydraulic shocks provide consistency and just this rapid response when you're hitting smaller objects on the road. And this system is kind of like the best of both worlds, because if you hit big objects on the road, the wheel can absorb quite a lot. If you're just hitting small stuff on the road, the hydraulic spring can also provide that rapid response and just, allow the wheel to cruise through without, any discomfort. The 4 shocks operate independently, but they also work closely with each other because they are mounted to the same frame. But, let's say you're hitting on the right corner first, the shock will go down first and gives you that immediate feedback from the suspension. Now, there's one thing I want to point out about the build quality of the F22 also, is that this wheel is incredibly rigid. The bottom of the wheel in the motor area actually have these 2 metal brackets that extends out and attaches to the battery box at the bottom. And on the top, the battery box attaches to the board tray, which is also metallic. And you can imagine it kind of create like a house shape. So that you have like the bottom, you have the top, and then you have the board tray. And, this creates just like a very rigid piece of metal, which I think is quite a good thing for many people because, the Lynx and the X-Way does have a tiny bit of flex when you doing turns and sharper maneuvers. For this wheel, you get the good old just rigid kind of wheel ride feel. Aside from all these things, in terms of build quality, I do quite enjoy the F22 rigidity. And as in the front handle is wide and large, and it's very grippable, and the rear handle is also about the same. But there is also a plastic part here, as you can see, that helps you kind of, sort up the handle a little bit in case you need to, lift the wheel up. If not, you can just grab it and then push it casually. But I like that they implement a little bit of plastic on the back end to just help, you know, push this thing around. All right, so moving on to amenities. The first thing I want to point out is this headlight right here, because this is actually more than just a typical headlight, because you see under the headlights is the charge ports. Yeah, there's actually 2 charge ports under the headlights, and this headlight also have the power buttons implemented to it. And this buttons, it's kind of like it's meant to do everything on the wheel. So if I double tap the button very quickly, I would disengage the gyro, right? If I tap the button again, it will just kind of adjust the lights. It's not gonna do anything. I would have to double tap again to engage the gyro. So this little orange buttons actually does a lot on this wheel. I'm not gonna say that I agree with this, because I prefer the veteran approach where there's like individual buttons for individual stuff. But this kind of simplifies the whole process, but you know, it does increase the chance of kind of misclicking things. You can see that the headlight have 2 modes. This is the brightest mode. You guys can't see it, but honestly, it's just about okay. It's not super bright or like long distance or anything like that. The low mode is also about okay, and there's just 2 modes on this one. So yeah, not anything special. Now for tail light, this is where the fun begins. As you can see on the back end here, you have a similar tail light to the KingSong S22, and you know, it's RGB. The light is customizable, and it is very, very eye-catching and responsive. The only gripes I have about this is that, as you can see, it's not very, it's a little too tucked in. So, you know, I think the visibility is quite limited from like all the angles, but it is still very bright, very visible, and it's very playful at the same time. And while we're at the back, I want to point out this gigantic speaker systems. These speakers are quite clear. They are super loud, and I think these are like the best speakers that is implemented in the EUC yet. Now below that, you have the little kickstands here, as well as the mudguard flaps. The one thing I really like about the F22 is just how good the mudguard is. It extends all the way to the kickstands, and then this has also additional flap that, you know, catches anything that just gets kicked up. So there's no chance of water getting kicked up to above the wheel. And same thing similar to the front, as you can see, you know, these mudguards are very, very usable, and they are quite good. All right, so we're back to the front, and I want to point out the trolley handle. So this trolley handle, it doesn't really lock. You know, it makes that click noise, but it doesn't lock. So if you kind of push it down, it would just slide down. This is not telescopic. It's just essentially 2 thick rods of metal on both sides with a front handle in the middle to show it up. And when you push this wheel, I find pushing from the front a little cumbersome. So I like to rotate it from the back and just push it like this. This is actually a lot better than, you know, pushing, you know, on the direction that it's supposed to push, because you have like all this wieldy weight. Now, while I'm up and walking here, I want to show you guys the part behind here. So underneath the trolley handle, you have your USB ports. There's a USB-A. There's a USB-C, and there's also an XT30 power port. I'm not sure what that will power, but you know, it's very interesting to just be able to, you know, charge whatever device that you want to use to charge. Okay, so one more thing I forgot to show is actually the display. So this is a similar display style to other KingSong wheel, except that this is a lot larger. And I actually like the display because it's very simple, it's very readable in every single situations, and it shows you what you need to show. You know, like if you're riding, it shows the speed. If you're stopping, it shows you the battery percentage, and I think that's good enough. Now with that said, in terms of amenities, I think KingSong never falls short in terms of just like, you know, the toys that you have for your wheels. You get good speakers, you get RGB lights, you get like auto daylight sensor where the light will turn on at night on its own, and you have like charge ports. There's just so much amenities kind of cram packed into a wheel, which is like typical KingSong fashions. However, I do want to point out that I feel like this front area is just really cramped, because you can see the charge port is below, power buttons on the top of the headlight, and behind this you have all like your USB charge ports and then the trolley handle, and then on the back you have nothing. So yeah, the front is kind of really cramped in terms of just like amenities. Another thing I want to point out are these stock pedals here. So these stock pedals are casted. What I mean is that all the spikes on the thing is just like cast metal instead of using actual metal spikes. However, they integrated this little, you know, like rich system here that is basically like just like rows of teeth that grips onto your foot. And I find that, you know, this design actually works quite well, because, you know, I never had issue with tractions when I use these stock pedals. Another thing I want to mention is, look at this humongous stock charger. Look how large it is. This is an actual 10 amp charger. Okay, so on 220 volt, you can output 10 amps. So technically, this is a fast charger. On 110 volts, it will output about 8 amps, which I think is more reasonable, because I was concerned about, you know, tripping the breaker because of just how much power this thing is going to pull. But luckily, you know, like this place that I have here, it can barely handle this charger. So, you know, I'm not tripping the circuit yet, but if you live somewhere that's like, you know, have weak circuit, you know, that's like have a load on it, be careful when you use the stock charger. All right, so in terms of build quality and amenities, you know, it's all nice and good, right? Well, let's talk about the bad stuff now, the ride feel of the wheel. Because of its incredibly wide, you know, wheelbase, the F22 Pro feels very stable, just like in most situations. You know, especially because this wheel is also quite tall, that helps with leverage when you turn and when you carve. But it's not all rainbow and sunshine with this wheel. The ugly parts start to rear its head once I get more comfortable and, you know, I try to go faster with the wheel. And that's when I start realizing that the F22 Pro really hesitate to go into the higher speeds. What I mean by this is that I have done multiple, you know, speed tests on this wheel, and the fastest I've hit is, well, 46 miles per hour. And I do want to point out that this is actual GPS speed. The F22 Pro reports GPS speeds, so it is not inflated. But nevertheless, you know, it is a little lower than most of other competitors EUC. And the one thing I really want to stress is that as I push close to this 45 mark, I have to push really hard, you know, like the same amount of force I used to get other wheels to go 50 miles per hour. That being said, I have heard from other people, you know, who said that they were able to get over 50 miles per hour on their F22 Pro. So I just want to stress that, you know, like the wheel feels really hard to accelerate around the 45 miles per hour mark. But I think in terms of power, it has enough room to go a little faster. You just have to push harder. And unfortunately, that's not something I'm willing to do on a newer wheel. So with that being said, I think that like the safe riding speed for the F22 Pro is around 45 miles per hour. You can go faster, but you just have to kind of accept the risk of, you know, overpowering or cutting the wheel out. You know, the wheel feels very hesitant just to go faster than, you know, the 45 miles per hour mark. So I'm not going to recommend, you know, like pushing past that mark. The second thing I want to talk about in terms of ride feel is that I don't think this wheel is made for high-speed riding. And the reason I wanted to say this is because it is a big wheel, it is tall, it is heavy, so it handles kind of exactly like that at the high speed. You know, having a wider tire base means that you have to lean harder to just kind of brings the wheel, you know, to start turning or to start carving. And, you know, and because the wheel is 110 pounds, you're gonna feel that weight in every single corner. And it doesn't feel really that great, you know, after maybe an hour of riding, because all that weight just gonna keep stressing on your legs, and you're gonna get tired faster comparing to, you know, other lighter wheel. And speaking of that, I actually went out and did a range test. I think I rode about 21 miles. What is it? I got about like 47% left. So, the range is a little more in tune with other, similar style of EUC. So I would say if you ride hard and fast on this wheel, you can expect 30 miles in one charge at most, which, isn't really great for a wheel that is this big and this heavy. All right, so at this point, I feel like you guys kind of understand, why my impressions of this wheel is not really all that great. And the reason why is like, when I take this wheel onto like my stress course, which is like a twisty mountain route ride, the wheel handles like a tall and big and heavy wheel, typically like the Sherman L or the X30, or even like the Master Pro and GT Pro, but the wheel doesn't offer any of the benefits. It doesn't go crazy fast. It have pretty good toe, but it kind of hesitate to go above 40 miles per hour. It also doesn't really have all that range that a big and heavy wheel should have. So like the performance that it have and the way it rides doesn't really match up. And this is where I'm really confused about the F22 Pro, and I'm unsure like, what is this wheel purpose? So when I say purpose, I mean that most EUCs are created to fulfill a purpose. Like the Veteran Lynx was made to be a trail wheel that can be a great all-rounder on the street as well, with great suspensions. The X-Way have a lot of torque and higher wheelbase. It's made for off-roading. With the F22 Pro, the wheel is tall, big, heavy. One would think that it would be insanely good for high-speed street riding, but then you realize that the wheel kind of hesitates to go fast. So I'm not really sure like why they create this wheel. And so guys, as dazed and confused I am about this F22 Pro, I think that this wheel will still be an ideal EUC for a very, very specific group of people. So because the F22 Pro is kind of like a lifestyle EUC, what I mean by this is that it have a lot of amenities. It have speakers, lots of charge ports, lots of USB ports, fun RGB tail lights, and functional trolley handle and all this stuff. The only downside is that it is a little heavy and it's a little big. I think that the F22 Pro is an ideal wheel for tall and heavy riders. If you're over 6 foot, if you are over 250 pounds, I think the F22 Pro might be a good fit for you, because I've talked to many of these like bigger riders, and they do feel that wheels like the X-Way or the Lynx, they're a little smaller, they're a little more, how do I say this, uncomfortable to ride. And so the F22 Pro is kind of like a smaller alternative to the super behemoth wheel like the Master Pro or the GT Pro Plus. And this wheel will give these big guys a lot of comfort, a lot of stability, and this wheel will carry you guys with ease, because it feels very, very good, like from that 0 to 35 mark. The wheel just accelerates, not too fast, not too slow, just about right. And it's always accelerate just about right in every single situation. Even when I'm going up slopes or when I'm going downstairs, it never felt like I'm going too fast or too slow. Perfectly controllable, so to speak. So yeah, if you are in the group of riders that I just mentioned, and you don't really have a urgent need to go like super high speed, super fast, super long distance, the F22 Pro is fine. This wheel is not going to win you any competitions. It's not going to blow you out the water. It's just a very consistent, a very right wheel that is relatively comfortable with good amenities, and it's not going to let you down. All right guys, so that's it with the video. I just want to make a short one this time, because like I said, I'm not feeling very positive about the wheel myself, but I think that's because I'm not the right type of person for this wheel. So yeah, if you're like a bigger rider, get this wheel a try. I think you will really, really like it. But with that said, this is the end of the video. I just want to give you guys a quick update before I close. I have all 4 wheels here, as you can see. Bliss, Lynx, X-Way, Apex. Working on a comparison video. It will come in about 1 to 2 weeks. Very busy right now. Not enough time to do everything. But just stay tuned. It will come. All right? Be safe, and thank you for watching. Goodbye.